Recording. All right. Mr. Paul Whitcombe, thank you for coming on my podcast, episode 96. And yeah, just get cut to it to summarize for everyone listening. In our text, long story short, in a way, you killed John Wayne Gacy.
In a way, that's correct.
Actually. In a way. Quite an intro. So who's today's guest? In a way, he killed a serial killer clown. So
that's right. I've never thought of myself that way, but yeah.
Moving on up in the world, Mike Durant, Black Hawk Down guy who killed John Wayne Gacy. Man, after this, it's got to be Elon Musk. I don't know how I'm going to top this.
I don't know what you're going to do. You're going to have to get Trump or somebody.
Yeah, I'm going to have to go nuts, man. I don't know how I'm going to top this. But yeah, so yeah, I don't even know. How do we get into that? What led to these? Or do you want to just introduce yourself?
Sure. Well, my name is Paul Whitcombe. I'm a trial lawyer. I've been doing it about 30 years now. Started out in Chicago, the big city, as a law clerk for a federal judge. After that, I spent some time with a big international law firm doing big, important cases that I really didn't get any credit for, but the big, important lawyers did. And then my son was born, so I took off and headed to small town and never looked back. But I did have some pretty amazing adventures during those years in Chicago.
I think the small town is the way to go.
I don't know. Well, I think so too. I wouldn't change it. Wouldn't change a thing.
I think once I can get this podcast off the ground and earning some money, I think I have one stop on my journey, and it's going to some secluded place and just cutting out the rest of the world. That's what Andy Stumpf said. He was a guy on SEAL Team 6 who was on Joe Rogan podcast. And he was talking about all watching the news. And he's like, it's so frustrating to watch the news because I'm watching, this was a couple of years ago. It's like, I'm watching ISIS take back over areas that like we had won over. He's like, my friends died fighting for. And Rogan's like, so what's the solution to all of this? He's like, it just seems like it's an infinite war in the Middle East. And, you spend your life fighting and then you come home and you see it's all just washing away. And he goes, I think the move is he just moved to a small town. And that's what he did. He's like, I ski, I hunt, and that's it. He's like, just cut it all out. That might be the move, man.
You know what? I haven't regretted it. I went from working on things that were on the front page of the paper every day to just enjoying myself, getting up, having a cup of coffee, and walking a block to the courthouse.
Yeah, man.
So it's much better.
I think that's the move. I don't have grandiose plans. I don't have. I'm going to have the biggest podcast in the world in a penthouse in Manhattan. I'm like, I want to get enough to like buy a cabin and go in the woods, get some satellite internet.
Drop off the grid a little bit.
Amen, man. It's amen. So, yeah. So before I rudely cut you off on a small town rant, what events led up to you was it advising the judge?
Yeah, I thought maybe it would make sense to talk a little bit about exactly who Gacy was.
Yeah.
And what he did before we talk about that, because my role in it was relatively small. But as you know, John Wayne Gacy was at the time the most, I hate to use the word successful, the most prolific murderer in the United States history. Convicted of killing 33 young men and boys and burying most of them under his house and under his garage in Norridge, Illinois, which is a suburb of Chicago. Started out young boy in Iowa. His father was a veteran from World War I, had an alcohol problem and used to take it out on his son. And his son never quite measured up. And, that doesn't tend to turn out real well. So a lot like other boys that are abused, he ran away. Wound up sleeping in the back of a mortuary, and for whatever reason, and this has never been explained, but for whatever reason, he crawled into a coffin with a teenager who had died and spent the night with the dead body. And his life seemed to take quite a turn at that point. Moved back to Iowa, and he was quite a community leader. He was in the running to be the head of the JCs for the whole state of Iowa. He recruited people. He was a volunteer leader. He's a very successful businessman. A lot of people don't know he ran his father-in-law's Kentucky Fried Chicken, 3 different franchises. He made good money, the equivalent of about $115,000 a year in those days. He had a wife and 2 children and was living the American dream. And for some reason, that night he spent with that corpse made something twisted in him that never quite turned. And he started soliciting young men and boys for sex, and was actually caught and convicted of molesting a minor in Iowa back in the 1960s, 1968. A lot of people don't realize that he was sentenced to 10 years in prison in 68. So this is years before he committed any of his murders. But he was paroled after just 18 months, and on the condition that he move in with his mother in Chicago. And they bought that house in suburban Norridge where this all started. So this was a series of events where Gacy should have been stopped, but wasn't. He was arrested again in Chicago for picking up a boy at a bus stop and trying to force things on him. Again in Norridge, and that was dismissed. So he had 3 brushes with the law and these exact type of crimes, violence, sexual violence, that he escaped relatively safely. He was even on probation during this time from his Iowa charges, but back in the day, word didn't get back. Everything wasn't connected by computer like it is now. He got away with it, and that's how his life of crime really started. He escaped really close brushes with the law and actually did go to prison when he was in Iowa, but those records were sealed, and he was free to become a community leader here in Illinois. So he actually got into politics. There's a famous picture of him with Rosalind Carter, the First Lady of the United States, which is hard to believe.
Yeah.
And what's really amazing about it is he had on his lapel a button with an S on it. And what that meant was he had received special clearance from the Secret Service, that he was not a threat to the First Lady, who at that point was a candidate's wife. But can you imagine that they gave special clearance to John Wayne Gacy? A real embarrassment to the Secret Service later.
Yeah, or a real what word am I looking for? Example of his, I guess, cunning or ability to go below the radar, or just to slip up on the Secret Service.
Yeah. Well, he did have the record in Iowa.
Okay.
He was a convicted sexual predator and a felon, but somehow he got close to Rosalind Carter.
So before we keep going, so when he spent that night with the corpse, how old was he?
18.
So he still went on to become a relatively successful businessman, making adjusted for inflation $150,000 a year.
He really did. There's no question.
Okay.
He was real intelligent.
Yeah. So that's odd. So there's that night, but it seems like he was still. It's like after that night, he had 1 foot dipped in the pool of psychopathy, but he still had 1 foot dipped in like kind of American dream.
Sure, he went from sleeping to the corpse to running 3 KFCs, having a wife and children, and being the president of the JCs. And that's pretty typical, isn't it, for these kind of guys?
Yeah.
They function on the surface in a very normal, very affable, very socially acceptable way, but they have this dark side.
Yeah.
And in later years, he would use that as the defense. He would claim he had these 5 different personalities, one of which was this dark side.
Jesus. Yeah. Keep going. Normally I talk nonstop during podcasts, but I'm listening. I'm listening to you. This is Paulcast. So
well, just go, man. To shoot in whenever you want to.
Oh, sure. I'm kind of intrigued. I'm just listening to this. So please keep going. Please excuse.
So we bring ourselves to 1972, and he establishes a contracting business here in Illinois, and is successful at it. He's making money. He's a big big success in the community. He's a Democratic precinct committeeman. And of course, everybody knows on the side, he had this clowning business. Now, people in the clowning business will tell you, if you take a look at John Wayne Gacy's clown makeup, which he designed himself, you'll see that that is an evil clown because of the sharp angles and the edges. The clowns that are designed to comfort children and to be funny, I frankly don't find them comforting.
Not at all.
but they have rounded edges and softer edges, and everything is totally different than John Wayne Gacy's Pogo the Clown, which was all angles and all dark and all very disturbing. Maybe that's
you're talking about makeup for the people listening. You're talking about makeup. Normal clowns, yes. Think of like around the mouth, circles. And John Wayne Gacy, if you look at it, it's like almost pyramids. It's sharp.
Yes, okay. Triangles. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Absolutely right. And so maybe that's we're looking at it later and saying, oh, obviously this is evil, but
maybe it was just,
you look at that Pogo the Clown, and that's not the kind of clown I would invite to my kid's birthday party.
I would never invite a clown to my kid's party anyway. So it's, that is a question. Are we looking too into it? If, on top of all of insanity, maybe that really just was like, maybe he wanted to stick out. I don't know. Maybe just being the devil's advocate, maybe he just wanted to be businessman. He was like, I'm going to have a different kind of clown, sharp edges. Maybe it was. Maybe he's, it's either he's so intelligent that this was just a business move, or he's so intelligent it's like this is his sort of, they love to be discovered. They love to get credit. Maybe that's something, is like, here's in hindsight type of thing.
It's really hard to say. And keep in mind that most of the things that we're talking about today, that it involve details of his crimes, his early life, they come from him. So there's no way to really verify a lot of these things.
Okay.
He could have, and probably did, have some rationale, some motive for spinning things his own way. So the story of him, like, for example, crawling into the coffin with the corpse, his father beating him, things like that, those come from Gacy himself. So take it with a grain of salt to that degree. The things that we do know, of course, about his crimes and what he committed, that's a different story. But that brings us to 1972 in Norwich, and here he is. And the story of his first killing is really very interesting. If, in fact, this was his first killing, he had picked up a young man at the bus stop, which became his M.O. Chicago has a large bus stop in the South Loop, Greyhound station, and it's huge, and people from all over the country flow through there, and there tend to be a lot of drifters, and it's a perfect place to find somebody that no one is looking for. Gacy was sophisticated enough, like a lot of serial killers. The Green River Killer, for example, Gary Ridgway, was very similar. He would pick victims that nobody would miss, and when that stops, when they start getting sloppy, that's when we catch them. But when this began, he picked up this young boy, persuaded him to come back to his house for the night with a promise of bringing him back to the bus stop in time for his bus the next morning. Took him back. They engaged in sexual relations. The next morning, Gacy woke up to find this kid standing over him with a great big knife in his hand. And Gacy defended himself, wound up taking the knife and stabbing the boy to death multiple times. Gacy admitted when the boy was gurgling, drowning in his own blood, that he had what he called an explosive orgasm, and realized that death was the ultimate thrill, in his words. And then he went out into the kitchen, found out the boy had cooked breakfast for the two of them, and had set plates for both of them, and he had just managed to wander in to wake him up and had never thought to put the knife down. And the whole thing was a big misunderstanding. But it awakened something in Gacy, and he buried him underneath his house. He didn't have a basement in a traditional sense. He had a crawl space. You know what that is. And with this victim, the first victim, the only victim that he did this with, he also covered the body with concrete. So at that time, he was perhaps not contemplating a life of murder, but it was only the first of 32 more young men and boys that he would lure to his house, usually with promises of work, and he would use alcohol, And part of his clown trick was that he would take out a pair of police handcuffs and put them on behind himself and lock them and get them out. And he did it by just keeping a key in between his fingers. And he would show the victims this. He called it the handcuff trick, which wasn't very creative, really. But he would do that, and then he would get himself out and say, I'll teach you this trick. And then as soon as they were handcuffed, he'd announce what the plan was that he was going to do to them. Asphyxiate them, of course, sexually assault them, stab them. He often would drown them and then revive them, bring them back to life so that he could repeat the same acts on them, sit on their chest and force them to perform acts on him. There were even at least 3 occasions where he did this to 2 victims in the course of a single night.
Jesus.
So he was in the period of 6 years that he was active. He was extremely active, even for a serial killer, rivaled by only a couple, like Gary Ridgway. And for them to be 2 in one night, that's a pretty amazing thing.
Now, this may be a stupid question. No one lived with him, right? Where's his wife and kids? Where's his mother?
Well, at first, the first victim, his wife and kids were in Nebraska visiting family. But not long after that, he announced to her that he was bisexual and wanted no more relationship with her. And so they divorced, and he moved out, or she moved out, left him the house. Originally, his mother had helped him buy the house, and she lived with him, but she was gone by that time as well. So he was living the bachelor life.
Yeah.
And that's what he called it, his cruising years.
Okay.
And that's exactly what he was doing. The difference is that at the end of his dates, he would wind up killing his partner. Man. And he got away with it for 6 years.
Yeah, so he doesn't have a fully fledged basement, so he's just got a crawl space. So I'm not going to interrupt you. Just keep talking. Actually,
that's any questions are good ones.
So it seems like with the first one, he covered him in concrete, and by that you mean literally poured concrete, not like concrete rubble or cinder blocks. I mean literally entombed.
Poured concrete.
Yeah. I mean, if you were to be a killer, I mean that would probably effectively throw off the literal scent, correct?
Well, eventually no.
Okay.
Because at one point, detectives executing a search warrant smelled the odor of decaying bodies coming up through the vents. But it managed to cover it up for years. Now, he didn't just throw them down in the crawl space. He actually had employees dig trenches. He told them that there were trenches for plumbers to run pipe, and he had them dig 6 foot long by 2 feet wide by 2 feet deep, which are the dimensions of a coffin, trenches in his basement, and warned them very carefully not to dig anywhere except where he had marked out with stakes for obvious reasons. And they did this. And so Gacy always had burial spaces ready. Sorry about that.
No, you're fine. Jesus, but I mean, I guess just as a 29-year-old guy, I'm thinking, if someone paid me to dig this, I would probably just be like, oh, cool, cash,
Right, and the guy's a contractor. You work for him, so
why not? Don't dig there. Well, of course not. It's probably a gas pipe or a cable.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now, of course, there's a significant amount of evidence that Gacy also had accomplices for at least some of these murders, including some of these people who dug those trenches.
Maybe just some other twisted. Yeah, I mean, maybe he offered it as a service, not just kind of high paying patrons. Kind of one shop stop. You can do it. I'll take care of it.
Absolutely right. And then there were at least 3 people that escaped from Gacy.
Oh shit!
And that they later testified and said what had happened. One of them actually was one of the people who helped him dig the trenches. But we know of at least 3 victims that turned the tables on Gacy. A couple of them actually got the handcuffs back on him, and he talked his way out of it. So 3 times things
3 times.
didn't go as planned, or his victims would have been even more.
God, that's so 33 in 6 years. So he's doing what, 5.25 a year? So he's doing one
Well,
every
yeah, that we know of.
2 months. Yeah, that we know of. But it seems like, I mean, his last words wasn't it "kiss my ass"? He didn't
Well,
do shit.
that's been written about, but the witnesses who were actually there said that had never happened.
Okay.
So that might have been earlier in the day, maybe in the yard, or maybe when he was walking to the execution chamber, but not when he was on the gurney, because there were witnesses there for the state, and they said that he didn't say anything at all.
Hmm.
So, but that's not to say he wasn't an evil, demented man. He certainly was, right up until the last moment. He had special privileges in the jail. He was writing things. He was painting. His paintings sold for a lot of money, and that bought him privileges in jail. As a matter of fact, there's a book out there. I can't think of the name of it. It was written by a kid as a college project. He had written to Gacy. Gacy invited him to visit him in the jail, and when he showed up, Gacy had a fancy 3-course meal set out for him, tablecloth, candles, everything. The guard left, and Gacy assaulted him right there in the jail.
Jesus Christ.
Can you believe that?
Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
I mean, it makes me think of like, not the assaulted, but it makes me think of like Goodfellas, like,
Oh,
the red
absolutely.
wine, slicing and we won't give,
Tray,
yeah, we won't give away any details for tomorrow's podcast. But yeah, very like kind of mafia privilege.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, he was a celebrity.
So when I thought prison privilege was like I thought that was like a not quite a euphemism. I thought that was like when the Nazis. I'm reading a book called KL, A History of the Nazi Concentration Camps by Nicholas Voschman. It's a dark book, but I didn't realize this. From like 1933 to 1939, they called taking people into concentration camps, they called it protective custody. So again, just another euphemism, right? Yeah, final solution, but cultural hygiene.
Yes.
But I thought prison privilege, to me, I figured that was something like, isolated from general population. But I mean, this was literal like Goodfellas, like
Very much like that.
Candles, 3-course meal, like
Yeah.
Jesus Christ. So
yeah. Really, really disturbing that somebody who's this notorious can still victimize people in prison.
Mastermind.
He was very intelligent. There's no doubt about it, to get away with this. And over the years, many people said to the police, my son is missing. He was last seen with this John Gacy. Would you please look into it? And the police never did connect him to anything.
So let's put on our tinfoil hats. Does it go deeper? Were some of his accomplices, were they high-ranking police officers? Who knows? I mean, I'm just, for shits and giggles, I'm just,
It's interesting you say that, because one of his multiple personalities was a bad cop that was the one that hated homosexuals and was punishing these people for their preferences.
Yeah.
Now, whether that was all made up or not, I can't tell you, but
Sure.
There's something very definitely wrong about John Wayne Gacy.
Yeah.
And whether he had multiple personalities or not, I can't tell you. Certainly it didn't succeed as his defense. That was one of his defenses.
There seems to be something with like repressed homosexuality in Gacy, Jeffrey Dahmer. I watched an interview with his parents, and they would go still visit him in jail. I mean, ultimately it is their child. I guess there's no love like a parent's love, but
right.
In the interview with I watched this like last fall, and it's his dad, and they're talking about everything. He's like, sure, maybe there were signs growing up, us fishing and him like mutilating a fish or something. But it's it's easy on one side to look at it and be like, yeah, you dumb shit, your kid's a serial killer. But at the same time, how many kids were just goofy kids that just, it could have been a fish, it could have been a glass bottle. If I was 5 years old and I found a glass bottle, I'd break it because it broke. It's glass,
Right.
cool.
Right.
There's an old abandoned building and put a rock through the window. Why? Because the rock went through the window. Why? Because I'm 5. I don't know. Like
Yeah.
it's so on one hand, it's like maybe it was just a kid. I don't know. Who knows? But then the interviewer asked about his son's homosexuality, and you can see on his face, his dad looked more upset about that than the serial killings. He was like, "It is a sin, and I pray for him greatly for that." And it's like, I'm not justifying anything Jeffrey Dahmer did, but I mean, like, you kind of get like, oh man, here's like I wonder what that does do to you in your formative years when you're, your dad, your father figure. I mean, it's like Joseph Campbell, The Hero's Journey. It's like atonement with the father. Like, what if you never get that sort of man to man, you know, I see you eye to eye as a now a full grown man. What if it's always, you know, you're a sinner, you're an abomination. What does that do to you?
There's an interesting thing about that with regard to Gacy, and that is that after Gacy successfully managed these KFCs, had the children, was a relatively popular member of society in Iowa, his father did come to him in tears and say, "I was wrong about you, son." Gave him a hug. They reconciled. Though I can't imagine that continued once Gacy was sent to prison for what they called sodomy in those days.
Mm,
But he and his father did reconcile,
okay.
at least for that period of time.
I mean, there seems to be, it's like, there almost is like a transferred trauma with beatings or, hatred of your son for being homosexual. I mean, Hitler's dad used to beat the shit out of him
Yeah.
all the time I mean, it was, for doing too well or doing poorly. And it's like, again, none of this justifies what they did. If you ever read the journals of the Columbine kids, that by no means leads to A equals B, B equals C. Therefore, it's justified to shoot 13 kids in a library. No, whatever the number was. No,
Yeah.
it does not justify. Like, I'm not just for anyone that wants to take that and run with it. No, but there does kind of seem to be some common thread of childhood trauma. And again, in my armchair psychologist, position, but it's, and then devil's advocate for everyone that is trauma, does experience trauma as a child. What about all of them that sort of quote unquote get over it or better themselves or do something else? But there does seem to be a
99 out of
common
100.
thread. Yeah, yeah. There does seem to be some, and who knows? Maybe that's a scapegoat for these evil individuals. My dad beat me, and that's why I started the Holocaust. My dad beat me, and that's why I raped kids. It's maybe that's just them. Who knows? But so so 3 guys got away
3 of them. And that, again, that we know of.
that we know of. Is there any reason? Because some serial killers, in my completely limited knowledge, they either inflate the numbers uh, almost comically large. I killed 500 people.
Sure.
It's like I'm in prison for life. Like, might as well go down as you know, as the best.
Right.
Um, with Gacy, it's 33 proven. In what way is that? As someone with a biology degree, no experience in law, no, I'm not someone that even has like a good knowledge on serial killers. How is this proven?
33 bodies.
Okay, all right. Well, there's the nail in that coffin. No, perhaps
Yeah.
not the best terminology,
26
but
under the crawl space and one under the garage, and the rest floating in the Des Plaines River.
Jesus Christ! And so he didn't say there were more than 33. He didn't try to inflate it. Okay.
No, when he confessed, actually, he confessed to his lawyer first. After there's a long story leading up to that, but he said, "I'm responsible for the death of 30, more or less." He didn't really even remember their names or the exact numbers, and he swore that the bodies had all been uncovered when they kept uncovering more. So he did
Mhm.
not try and inflate
Okay.
his so-called accomplishments at all.
No, so I had on Mike Durant last week, and leading up to him, I listened to he's written 2 books, and then there's also the famous book Black Hawk Down by Mark Bowden. I listened to those 3 books, listened to each of them twice. So it was about 50 hours over the course of a week, trying to learn everything I could about him,
Sure.
just even though I only had him for 30 minutes. And then so when I talked to you and you're like, "Hey man, I'd love to do it." I was like, "Okay, cool. I'm gonna dive into." Man, I probably read about 10 minutes of Wikipedia on John Wayne Gacy, and I just said, "That's it. I'm not." I'm, I had on a Delta Force guy. I learned everything about Delta Force.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's no disrespect to you or not wanting to prepare for it. This was literally something where I was like, I can listen to this book about these Delta Force guys just mowing down Somalis.
Yeah.
Something about Pogo the Clown killing young men. I was just like, I'm gonna go into this podcast blind because I can't spend 50 hours saturating my mind with this. So I apologize if I'm not up, I'm not spitting out facts and numbers. I just, for my own sanity, I didn't dive into it.
No, I
Um,
don't blame you one bit. I just I happened to get into it because of my experience
no,
with
that,
Gacy, and then in later years as a prosecutor, I went to training with Roy Hazelwood, who was one of the founders of the Behavioral Sciences Unit at the FBI,
yeah,
that began the study of serial killers,
yeah,
spree killers, people like this.
yeah,
So I had some really great opportunities to get insight into this kind of thing that
mm,
thankfully as a prosecutor I never ran into it.
yeah.
But it's a uniquely American phenomenon that someone would go out and kill 33 young men or 47 prostitutes or whatever have you and get away with it over a period of years only to be caught when they slip up, really.
Jesus. Um, I'll edit this part out. I really have to use the restroom. I drank way too much water earlier. I'm sorry. I'll be back in 20 seconds.
Yep.
Excuse me. I apologize.
Nothing more distracting when you
Yeah.
gotta go. You gotta go.
Yeah. I realized I was kind of, I gotta go to the bathroom. This is just going to be a bad conversation if I don't go to the bathroom. Um, um, and by the way, when I say go for about an hour, I always tell people that just so they don't feel like I'm holding them hostage. We can go any amount of time we want. We can keep
Sounds
talking.
fine to me.
Yeah.
Sure.
So I don't want you to think that I'm cutting you off on now or anything. But okay. So you said uniquely American phenomenon is 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 that accurate?
Well,
There's not
there are not uh, I wouldn't say there are no serial killers in the rest of the world. There certainly are. There's some in Central America. Uh, there's a
the
whole
Peak
nother.
the Andes.
Yeah, and actually, a guy I went to law school with was the victim of one of these Central American serial killers. But they were actually American expatriates that were down there. But yes, there are some in Europe, in Japan. There's a famous serial killer from Russia. There
Mm.
are, of course, these people, but it's highly more likely here in the United States for reasons which nobody has any clue. But there's a
Yeah.
lot more of it
Yeah.
going on here.
And that's weird. I mean, you could. the go-to point would be like, and that's the problem with guns being legalized here. For the record, I don't support that. I think Second Amendment's
Well,
awesome. But
Gacy didn't use
yeah,
it.
that's what I'm saying. Gacy didn't use a gun. And even then, it's not like it was some shooter that went
No,
out and. So
no.
why is that an American thing, or is that just
Well,
beyond the
I
scope?
guess with Gacy, maybe it's because rope is just too freely available. Because he used rope, I mean,
Jesus.
yeah, rope and oily rags and underwear and whatever he could stuff down a victim's throat. So the whole gun control thing is not really relevant as far as John Wayne Gacy goes,
No.
or to many serial killers. They prefer a much more personal way of killing someone.
Yeah. Yeah, because you got to remember, this isn't like a boiled over, lock and load and
No.
just go out. Their thing it's not like, their thing isn't like, I killed this many people. It's each murder to that. It's a very, like you said, I mean, orgasmic, euphoric thing.
Yes.
They don't want to
Yes.
waste it all in one go.
No, and that's the difference between a serial killer and a spree killer.
Freaky. Okay.
So a spree killer is someone who might go up in the tower and shoot 8, 10 people, or the Columbine.
Sure.
That's not a serial killing. That's a spree killing.
Okay.
Serial killers are marked by planning, cool down, keeping of souvenirs. They're very, very specific and very different than a spree killer who's driven by madness, rage, insanity, and has, in a very brief period of time, kills multiple people.
Jesus Christ. What is the legal definition then? Spree killing versus like terrorism. Does terrorism have to have political intent?
Well, I think with terrorism, you mean that's something that's been criminalized since 2001 all across the country. A terroristic act is the use of violence to try and induce or to try and suppress any specific action. So you can use the terroristic threat for a lot of different things. We even had them here in a small town, Illinois, where someone called the bank and said, well, you're giving loans to wetbacks, and I'm going to blow up the bank. That's a terroristic threat.
Sure, that is. Yeah, because you're right. Yeah, okay. That's so if it happened today, or could someone retroactively, if they really wanted to, could they go in and say Gacy was a terrorist? And if you've got a lawyer that was really dedicated to it, could they somehow?
I don't think Gacy really fits. He had no agenda to do anything other than to find his own pleasure.
Yeah.
He had no intention to cause anybody to do anything or to make them refrain from doing anything.
Yeah.
He was just interested in John Wayne Gacy and his own twisted fantasies.
And it's so weird that like he just so happens to have the name John Wayne.
Well, yes, and I'm sure it's not a mistake.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, it's just, wasn't there some politician in like 2010? I think it was someone running for president. It was maybe didn't get the nomination, but was a candidate. It was a female. I cannot remember her name for the life of me. Don't even remember what party, but she's from, I think, a town where he is from. And she thought it was just John Wayne. She thought Gacy was like the original John Wayne's last name, but he just became known as John Wayne. It's like, do you know LeBron James or do you know LeBron? And so she was like, there's an actual, it's like 2011, but I remember this was Joe Rogan, like when his podcast first started going, he was like, he had this talk and he was like, it almost feels like we are living in a simulation and the universe is fucking with us because it's trying to get us to wake up, and it sprinkles some evidence on us that we're in a simulation, and then if we don't wake up, it goes, all right, keep going. We'll keep going. So the first one is Anthony Weiner gets caught sending dick pics, and he's like, really? A guy named Weiner?
This can't be real.
Yeah.
It's too absurd.
Yeah, the universe is like, it's just a game. But you still don't get it? Let's keep it going. So a lady running for president goes, I think it was Waterloo. She's like, Waterloo, Iowa.
Yeah. Yes, it was Waterloo. Yeah.
Okay. She goes, home of John Wayne Gacy. I just feel that's just the embodiment of what my campaign is. It's like, if there's ever been a political suicide, my
That would
God,
be it.
not
That,
deplorables, not 47%,
yeah,
right there.
that's pretty bad. Yeah, you
That
don't
is
want to pull up John Wayne Gacy as your campaign
no,
image
yeah, I
for
remember.
sure.
Yeah, I remember me
But
and
it's,
my
it's
friend.
bizarre things like that that allow us to catch these guys. That's how he got caught. It was a bizarre little mistake
Yeah,
that it was just luck. It was pure luck that the police
yeah.
actually caught the guy.
So let's go into that. How did he get? Because, like I said, I, I admittedly did not do my studying intentionally. So how did he get caught? What happened?
Well, I suppose the basement or the crawl space had to be filling up at some point. You've got 26 bodies down there. And neighbors had complained about lights going on in the middle of the night, lights going off, screaming, yelling, crying in the middle of the night. Nothing had happened. They'd interviewed Gacy on a number of missing young boy cases, sometimes 2, 3, 4 times, always believed him. He was just this community leader, and they believed him. One time he was at a local grocery store and he met a young boy that his name was Peast. I think that's how you pronounce it. The guy worked there. Kid worked there. And Gacy met him at the back. He went in, he told his mom, I'll be right back. I'm going in to check on something. Went in, Gacy met him and convinced him to leave with him. And took him home. The kid was never seen again. So mom said, look, he was with John Wayne Gacy. That's the last time I've seen him. They interviewed Gacy. Gacy says, absolutely not. Didn't see the kid, had nothing to do with him. So what's real interesting is they had a reason to believe that the police thought that Gacy was holding this kid against his will. They didn't have any clue that he was this serial killer and they were going to find 33 dead people. So they got a search warrant and searched Gacy's home, and they found wallets, driver's licenses, class rings, all these trophies, which is another serial killer thing that he could use to relive these crimes. And what they found that was real important is they found a Navy winter coat, and in that coat was a receipt from the store where this kid had disappeared. They checked the number on that receipt. They went back to the store and they talked to a girl that worked at the store and said, well, the boy loaned me that coat because I was working back in the frozen meat section and I was cold. He loaned me that coat, and I had take back in the day, this is before your time, but back in the day, you'd have to take film to be developed. You
Yeah,
couldn't
I
just
know
do
that.
it on your phone.
I know that. Yeah.
So she took film to be developed and got the receipt for her film and put it in the coat pocket. And forgot the receipt was there and gave the coat back to the boy. So that's how the police knew Gacy was lying about not having contact with this young man, because they found his coat with that receipt in Gacy's house.
That's so terrifying.
And that started lockstep surveillance of John Wayne Gacy.
That's so terrifying how he gets away with it until there's the, I guess, literal coat, but metaphorical. There's the, as Mike Durant said in his book about how everything went wrong with the guy falling out of the helicopter at the beginning.
Yes.
He describes it as like a thread on an old coat. It just starts to come undone.
Exactly.
And it doesn't seem like much, but in hindsight, when the coat's just a pile of string, you see in hindsight, it just started to come undone. So that was it.
That was it. The receipt in the coat pocket was that loose thread that you're talking about, that when the police tugged on it,
started to come out.
It started to come out, and that led to them following Gacy everywhere he went for hours and hours and days. And Gacy was very friendly. He bought them lunch. He bought them drinks. He invited them into the house. He did everything to cooperate with them, but eventually it wore him down.
Yeah. It's probably like, no brainer. But again, from my non-legal or criminal mindset, it makes sense. It's like, so what's the big deal? So what? He had this coat, but it's not just that, but it's, well, then why the hell would you lie about it?
Right.
What is the reasoning behind it? It's,
yes.
It's like if, it's like if in a week you found out my name was actually Jared, you'd be like, why did you lie about that? Like, it's just
Right. What
a tiny
for?
thing.
Yeah.
The real Tommy's chopped up in my basement. No, it's so. But so to rewind it a little bit, he had been interviewed a couple times about other missing people.
Oh,
But
yes.
this is before, like you said, this is before the digitization of everything, right? This was
Yeah.
70s.
Now,
Early,
before, not only was he interviewed about missing people, but he was actually charged twice with sexual assault on young boys
yeah,
in Chicago.
yeah,
And he had been convicted once in
when,
Iowa.
yeah,
And
when.
he was on probation for that when he was charged in Chicago the first time.
So, is if this had been in a different era, if this had been digitized, where the cop can just go back and get in a little, the bulky laptop thing they have in their car, and they could,
Mhm.
oh, John, but this is before that. This is just,
Yes, it is. But
there's no
yes,
way.
this
Yeah,
probation officer in Iowa never found out that he was arrested for the
yeah,
sexual assault on the boy in Chicago.
yeah. And how can you? It's like, how many people can you keep track of, right? And it's, and
Right.
what is the priority? Is this, at a time when shit like Watergate's happening? It's like, why am I following this one guy? Because everyone could potentially be that guy who has the
Right.
resources.
And the
Yeah.
victims are not exactly the kind of high profile victims that
Uh,
generate a lot of heat and a lot of pressure to
It's not
solve these crimes.
it's
It
not
was just some
JFK.
drifter
Yeah.
passing through Chicago on the bus.
Yeah. It's not JFK where the CIA and the FBI are going to track down everyone's mom and everyone's mom's childhood friend who
Right.
killed,
And it's not to diminish the value of these
No,
people
no, no, not at all.
whatsoever, but
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 it puts it in perspective, how did he keep getting away? It's okay, one, let's look at the era, technology. It's, there's not, I can't pull up my touch screen and, okay, this is John Wayne Gacy. No, this is just whatever.
right. And
And
he had his
also,
record sealed from Iowa, something for a sex offense you cannot do today. We have sex offender registries.
yeah,
Sex, not only would he never have gotten out of prison after 18 months like he did, but he would have been a registered sex offender most likely for his whole life just based on that 1968 conviction.
so again, it's all easy in 2020. We can be, why didn't you do this? Why didn't you catch him? It's all the signs point to it. So let's just even forget about all this stuff. Let's just look at this one little microcosm. He had been interviewed about multiple kids or multiple missing people. I feel like that enough is like, wouldn't you just at some point be like, okay, isn't it weird that whenever someone goes missing, we somehow or another get a tip to this guy? At
Yeah.
some point, would you be like, when is it, at what point does it become mathematically improbable and just like, okay, you know, why is everything lead to this guy? Even though he's just a successful guy, wife, kids, runs a couple franchises, at some point, it doesn't matter who it is. You'd be like, this isn't normal. Lightning doesn't strike twice.
Where there's smoke, there's fire,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
here there was smoke. He's convicted and sent to prison in Iowa. He's charged again here and then charged again.
Yeah.
So what's going on here?
Yeah. Is it
It's easy for us
incompetent?
to look back at it and say, and the truth is, Chicago Police Department didn't talk to the Norwich Police Department. They didn't talk to the Waterloo Police Department. They weren't all connected, like you said.
Yeah.
As you pointed out, it was a different era.
And again,
Everything was on physical files, on cards, in
Yeah.
Rolodex files, or
Yeah.
in hard files. Not like it is today.
Yeah. And even if it was all connected, there's no, again, who is it? Is it JFK and Lee Harvey Oswald, or is it just some dude and, some missing people? And not to downplay their importance, but again, where do the resources go? Why would Norwich and Waterloo be, you connect DC and New York, sure, I got it. But Waterloo, Norwich, about who? About what? About some missing people? What? Yeah,
Yeah,
whatever.
it's just as easy to think, well, they just drifted on to the next place.
Yeah.
We don't know that they're dead. We didn't have a body.
Yeah, exactly. It's
They're
so,
just gone.
yeah, you
Maybe
got
they
it.
just ran away. They're troubled young men.
Yeah. And
Drifters.
yeah. And again, so it's like, you know, again, he's using even to just downplay the point I just made about, at what point do you go, how come all roads lead back to this guy? Well, it's because there's probably been tons of innocent people who legitimately did just always end up having fingers pointed at them. And how many innocent guys were raided until finally they were like, hey, fuck you.
Right.
I own this Jiffy Lube. I have a wife and kids, and they really are completely innocent. At some point, you got to go, okay, well, now we can't follow every path because sometimes it is just Bob, and Bob's just got shit luck, but it really is just Bob.
Yeah.
So it almost, yeah, kind of just perfect storm brewing. But this coat leads to the coat. So where do we go? So they start following him 24/7.
24/7. He starts to break down.
Okay.
He eventually goes to his lawyer's office and asks for a drink, drinks the whole bottle, and passes out. But before he does that, he tells his lawyer he's responsible for killing 30 people, give or take 2 or 3. So the police, they wind up getting a second search warrant. And that's the one where the detective is in the bathroom and the furnace kicks on and he smells the smell of decaying bodies.
Oh,
And within 2-3 minutes, he finds an arm. And that's when they stop right there and they say, okay,
wait. What led to smelling and finding an arm? That's
Well,
quite
the smell was
quite a
coming up
jump.
through the furnace
Yeah, yeah,
in the bathroom, in the house itself,
yeah. I get it from underground, but
underneath. And that's a pretty distinctive smell,
what?
decaying flesh. So
Yeah,
they go down to the crawl space, and within a very short period of minutes, they find a
okay,
decayed arm.
okay. I was thinking that these were all entombed in concrete. Okay,
Nope, just the first one.
okay.
Hmm.
What? I guess it's kind of impossible to describe a smell. What? Because there's always like two. Even again, reading this concentration camp book, but it's and again, Mike Durant being in Mogadishu. But that's something that you always read or hear in books, and it's like the unmistakable smell of decaying flesh or the unmistakable smell of burning flesh. You always
Yeah.
hear about that in war stories, World War II, Vietnam,
Yes.
Mogadishu, Nazi concentration camps, and then there's always
Right.
the decaying flesh. What is there any way that smell can be described? Because it almost seem like that's something that like you'd want to let everyone experience once, just so everyone has eyes and ears.
It's somewhere between the smell of a skunk and kind of the smell of natural gas. It's very pungent like that and very repulsive.
I swear to God, this last summer, every once in a while, there would be a smell that I would almost vomit.
Yeah.
Last summer, and I was doing like renovation at this apartment, just carrying stuff. And it was right by these dumpsters, and like there's a couple times on like a couple dates where like I couldn't go near it. I would literally tell the guy, "Hey, I'm gonna do this part tomorrow." Like
Mhm.
because I'd walk by it and I get to the top and I'd start heaving.
Yeah.
I've always thought in hindsight that smell was so bad. I almost feel like I should have. I don't want to like waste people's time, but if I feel like I should have called the cops.
Well, it could have been a dead cat or a
Yeah, okay, could
raccoon or
okay,
something like that. Let's hope
yeah,
so.
yeah. Okay, well, that's what I'm saying. I always feel like that's something that, yeah, you should, there's like a couple things you learn in life growing up. It's like don't talk to strangers, blah blah blah. I feel like one of them should be like, yeah, you get it burned into your brain when you're in like kindergarten. This is the smell of decaying flesh or something. It's
That
pretty.
one, and if you ever see a gun, don't touch it.
Yeah, don't touch. Yeah, all guns are loaded.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
practice trigger discipline or Darwin's coming for you. But yeah, so okay, so smells that, finds the arm, and then
Then it's on.
so
And
what
over the
happens? You
next
call him.
months, I mean, this went on
What
for
happens then?
months.
What happens right there? What
Right
do you
there, then
call it
they
back up?
stop right away. Everybody backs up. They call in the
Crime
appropriate
scene.
people,
Okay.
and they start digging, and they find body after body after body after body. Sometimes 6 and 7 bodies in one day. Then they had Christmas, so they had to pause. Can you imagine being one of those police officers going home for Christmas? Then they had to pause again because the blizzard of '79 hit Chicago, and they didn't actually dig up all the bodies until March. So you're talking about December through March. This was going on, and on the news every night, the coroner's wheeling out another corpse, and most of them died of asphyxiation or strangulation, except for the 10 of them they couldn't tell how they died, and one of them had multiple stab wounds to the sternum and rib cage, and we know that to be the first victim.
Yeah. Jesus
So Gacy drew
Christ.
him a map and said, roughly, here's where everybody's buried, and
So he told
spray painted on the floor of his garage where he had buried the other guy. And the last kid, the one that led to him getting caught, he actually dumped in the river. And the cadaver dog went in to sniff Gacy's car, went and sat on the passenger seat and laid down, which they call the death response, to indicate that a dead body had been in that spot. And so Gacy's Oldsmobile was the way that he used to transport that last victim to the Des Plaines River. And he eventually turned up way down river, miles away. I don't recall where it was, but quite a ways. And they did find the body.
So you said Gacy spray painted. So what, as they're like, what happens in that sort of limbo time where they're finding bodies? Like, does he just get thrown in a jail cell? Like,
Yes, as soon as they found that arm,
like you're done, like
they
already.
charged him with murder.
Yeah, so you're done already. But
Right.
there's that sort of, I don't know, but it's also not quite said and done. So what happens between that and like the final body? Like, are they? You said spray. So do they bring him in? Say, show us where they are. I'm
Yes.
guessing what, with a shotgun to the back of his head, right?
Yeah,
No?
right.
And
No,
rightfully
very
so.
cooperative.
Right? Okay. Okay.
Very cooperative, and he, like I said, drew them a map. He showed them where things were buried. He thought that they had found all the bodies 4 or 5 before they actually did find all the bodies. He said he just couldn't remember their names or how many exactly there were. So
Jesus Christ.
yeah, but of course he wanted to retract all that later. He didn't go easily.
Yeah.
He fought all the way to the end, but initially he was very cooperative.
Now, do you think, have you ever heard of like the intelligence term in the intelligence communities, limited hangout?
Don't
It's
know that one.
limited hangout's the idea that you, let's say there's either intentionally or either there's a leak and then so you cover it up doing a limited hangout, or you initiate the leak and that is the limited hangout. But an example would be, there's no way to prove this, but it'd be something like, let's say Snowden releases all that stuff. A limited hangout would be, so the NSA comes out and says, you're right, it's true, mass surveillance, but they're coming out and they're admitting to it, blah, blah, blah. Because if they admit to this and everyone's like, yep, they admitted, they got their tail between their legs and they're hanging their head low. A limited hangout, which is a real thing. It is a they're doing that because there's a lot more stuff that they figure, hey, and instead of just resisting this at all costs and saying, we didn't do that, Snowden's lying, because that's just going to put more and more eyes on you. Instead of you just say, you're right, we did it, it was unconstitutional. Well, if he admitted, everyone kind of goes, well, they admitted it. They're walking away with their tail between their legs. They're doing that to hide Operation XYZ.
Sure.
Or in some cases, someone like Snowden would be that would be an actual operative, and it'd be, you're gonna leak all this stuff and we're gonna come out with our heads hanging low, and follows the same thing, limited hangout. But that's also true with, like, we've done that with like fighter jets. We'll leak something, you discover this classified program, and once the classified program's discovered, everyone, the prying eyes turn away. Oh, we got the new fighter jet. But they did a limited hangout because the real bee's knees fighter jet is behind that curtain.
Yeah, absolutely. I understand what you're saying.
Do you think Gacy's an intelligent guy? He wasn't just, some psycho spree shooter. Do you think there was any intention of him? Because you said he admitted to all of them being found and then they'd find more. Do you think that was an attempt at a sort of limited hangout? For whatever reason, he's not getting off, but
it's hard to say because he's caught. He lived there alone. They're finding body after body in his basement. Of course, in later years, he tried to retract that. There was a lot of evidence suggests that he did have accomplices for at least some of these murders, including 3 of them that he was able to prove he wasn't in town at the time that they were reported missing. And one of the victims, remember we said that 3 actually got away.
Sure.
One of those victims reported it wasn't just Gacy that was torturing him. There was another person there. So there's a lot of evidence to suggest that somebody else was involved in some fashion in some of these murders. Who, how many, which ones, we're not certain. But that person would still be out there, assuming they're still alive.
And that person maybe they have law enforcement ties because, I mean, Gacy had privilege in prison. You said that they didn't always follow up on these Gacy leads. It kind of seems like he has, again, just put on our conspiracy theory hats. It kind of does seem like he has almost an inside guy or something.
That's one explanation for it. It's either that or it's just the right hand not knowing what the left hand was doing,
Okay.
and priorities directed other ways. Who knows?
Yeah.
Who knows, really?
Yeah.
But over the years, he claimed that he didn't do these things, and he claimed he didn't remember them. He claimed he was insane. That was the majority of his claim. But other people helped him. All kinds of different things. In
Hmm.
the end, it didn't do him any good.
Hmm.
But he definitely changed his tune about being cooperative. He was the first person that was executed in Illinois against their will in a very, very long time.
Against their will.
Yeah, he fought it all the way to the end. A lot of people do not do that, and that's how I got involved, is because he resisted through the court systems right up until the very last minute.
I almost forgot that you were involved. Yeah. So let's tie that in. Yeah. So yeah. So he's how long is he, so what you said, it was maybe I'm just butchering this. There was a year and a half between the time they found the arm and the last body.
No, it was 3 or 4 months.
3 to 4 months. Okay, I'm an idiot. How long is he in prison then? Between
Well, that was a very long time.
yeah, it draws it out.
Yeah, 78 until 94. So that's a long time.
Yeah, 16 years of
Of all of the appeals through the up and down the state courts and the federal courts, and even final appeals to the United States Supreme Court, which were all denied by the Friday before his Tuesday execution date.
So how exactly does that happen when someone just keeps tying up I mean, is it because, I mean, I imagine, because you said against his will, so I'd imagine normally when someone gets a death sentence, that do they just accept that? Just
It's very common, that not every time, but
okay.
in Illinois, the last few executions before Gacy, they did not continue to appeal. They withdrew their appeals.
Okay. So Gacy's not doing that. How is that? Is it because the end goal is execution, and here's someone saying he does not want to be executed? Is it because of that it's able to be drawn out, because it has to be, the stakes are so high that every last appeal has to be honored or considered or something?
That's absolutely right.
Well,
That's absolutely right. So you go all the way up to the Illinois Supreme Court, and then you have the federal court system, which is where I worked,
okay.
where you can go all the way up to the United States Supreme Court. And it was those appeals that took from 1978, 1979, all the way till the 1990s
I
for
mean,
him to actually be executed. He was on death row there for 14 years.
but I guess it's a beautiful thing about, we live, in the long barbaric history of humanity. We live in a country prosperous and, despite as much as a lot of people hate it, progressive enough that even a serial killing clown gets due process.
Yes.
I think that's a beautiful thing.
It is. And think about the evidence that was against this guy.
Yeah, with that.
26 bodies in his basement.
And he's still able to get these appeals. I
Yes.
almost think that's good. It's, it's, on one hand, you want to sort of, I just butchered my words. On one hand, you sort of just want to be like, fuck this guy. He killed 33 people. Get rid of him. But on the other hand, it's like, it's kind of good that everyone gets that fair shake, even if they are
because
just
it's final.
Yeah, because it's final. It's not just like, oh, well, you can be released from prison and get, repaid for all your lost time. It's like, no, because once we're sending you beyond, on the great beyond.
Especially in a state like Illinois, which is known for being corrupt. From a long, long time ago. In Illinois, we no longer have the death penalty.
Okay.
And part of the reason for that is we've actually released more people from death row because we found out they were wrongfully convicted than we actually executed.
And that points to why every appeal does have to be like why someone can drag it out for 16 years or 14 years.
Yes.
It's because you can't, because what happens when you do execute someone that was wrongfully executed? Like you can't
You
come
can't
back
undo
from
it.
that. That's like you can't. So like yeah, you have to. Every case has to be treated like it's almost like the legal system is like a surgeon, and it's like every case has to be treated like it's the president.
That's absolutely right. And there have been many cases, and I've been involved with a couple where people were on death row for 20 years, and it turned out DNA evidence comes out, the science is improving. We can now prove that someone else committed this crime.
Yeah.
And that's happened in Illinois many times.
Yeah, and that only needs to happen once to I think that like that has to be the precedent forever. Be like,
Yes,
if it happened once, it can happen again.
you
Like,
bet it can, because our system is not perfect. It depends
no,
on the discretion of police officers, the credibility of witnesses, the intelligence of judges and juries. All those things are of variable quality.
mm. So that being said, how does it get to a point where even if someone's resisting it, it does get to a point where it's like, nope, you lost.
Eventually, you exhaust all your appeals. Gacy had spent 14 years, more or less, appealing, arguing every possible thing from I wasn't in town, I was crazy, my lawyer was terrible, the death penalty is inhumane, all those things, and they had all been rejected, all the way up the court system. So the night before his execution, he filed one last request. It's called habeas corpus. It's Latin for you have the body. And it's him going to the federal court system in Chicago. He had now been transferred from Menard, which is a horrible, scary place down in southern Illinois where he had been held, to Joliet for his execution. So he filed a last-minute appeal, habeas corpus. Everything else had been denied by the courts previously. As of Friday, the United States Supreme Court had not intervened to stop this. Filed it, it got assigned to the judge who I worked for as law clerk that day.
Mm.
And so we knew that we were in for a long night. His lawyer was really a smart guy by the name of Greg Adamski, arguing all these things that had been argued before, including that execution is inhumane and that execution by injection was in fact torture. You've heard it many times. So we were there until late into the night arguing this kind of thing. And the judge who I worked for was really a good man, a federal judge. He decided to deny it. It wasn't hard. It had been done by another judge on Friday. The appellate court had denied it on Friday. The Supreme Court, he was essentially saying, I'm not buying your argument that execution by lethal injection is inhumane. I will not stop this. He turned to me. He said, Paul, I want you to write the order. So that's exactly what I did. He reviewed it, made whatever changes he wanted to make in it, and had me finish it up. And he signed it. And within a few minutes, they started the execution process. The interesting thing is, it did in fact go bad. One of the drugs had gelled up in the line and did not go into Gacy's vein as planned. So there was some kind of a mess up there. No indication that he suffered at all. No indication that he said anything about kiss my ass or anything like that. He went to sleep. And the world's a little less evil today because of that.
Yeah. I mean,
that's how it happened. So it was that night, the media was everywhere. As you can imagine, there were demonstrators outside. Something like 1,000 people went to Joliet prison to demonstrate in favor of the execution, which is amazing when you think about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
They wanted to be a part of it somehow.
Yeah.
And Gacy had his last meal. He walked around the yard, smoked a cigarette or a cigar. He said he wasn't at all scared. He was in a good mood and went meekly to the end.
Yeah, man, I'm torn. Part of me is like, he got much more than he deserves. He should have been, shot out back kind of thing. But it's part of me is like, isn't there so who's that quote from? The you can judge the progressiveness of as of a society by the condition of their prison system. I don't
By
remember.
how it treats its most vulnerable members.
It's how do you treat the lowest wrong, the weakest link.
Right.
It's part of
The
me
other
thinks
aspect of that, though, is Gacy's death was much easier than the death he gave to any of his victims.
yes, it's
Strangulation is
why
a
does he
terrible way to go.
why does he get, drowned, revived and drowning,
Yes.
and after having it announced to you, hey, you're gonna die, I'm
Yes.
gonna kill you. It's but then for the record, I'm someone that like, no, absolutely, kill him, fuck that guy.
Yeah.
But just from the argument of like, an evolution in society of, of humans, we're always evolving, you know. At one point it was common knowledge that women shouldn't vote. I mean, one of the arguments was because women can be silly. I mean, you can almost imagine all these guys in top hats, like, well, of course, women with their periods and their dresses, they're silly. They can't vote for. You
Yeah.
got, but I mean, that was at a time where it's like these are the same guys that were running these big, like, these oil tycoons, and it's like they're clearly intelligent guys. So the point I'm getting at is, even though the common agreed upon idea of the day, they must be silly, can be agreed upon by these, relatively intelligent guys who are, if we're alive today, would probably still be CEOs and barons. So despite all of us agreeing like this guy has to be killed, part of me is like, as much as I can't see it, is there going to be a date in the future where we'll look at the same way as, can you believe that they still killed them? And for
Well, Illinois has come to that view, and we no longer have executions. I
mm,
had a client on death row, as a matter of fact, whose death sentence was commuted by Governor George Ryan, because we just don't execute people in Illinois anymore for those reasons that you're talking about.
yeah, I'm torn on that. Part of me is like, they're not going anywhere. Put them in maximum security. Yeah, the taxpayer has to foot it, but I mean, come on, drop in the bucket compared to like what we're actually spending each year.
Yeah, and what it costs to fight the appeals on an execution are
Yeah,
enormous.
yeah, just throw them in a cell. Just let them. If they want to be executed, they can be voluntarily executed, and if they don't want to, then just screw the appeals. Just all right, whatever. You're in prison forever. It's
Yeah,
But then on the other hand, I'm also someone that's sheltered from this. I have no experience with this. I'm sure if I spent one afternoon helping dig up bodies,
hmm,
I'd be like, load the 44. I'll go get them myself.
yeah,
You know, it's, what did Eisenhower have all the troops do? Take as many pictures of the concentration camps as possible, because one day this will be denied.
yes,
They went and got all the civilians from the nearby towns and said, you're complicit in, or if you're not complicit, this is what you were turning an eye at. You literally kind of like grabbing a dog and making it smell its own piss. Don't piss in here. Soldiers, U.S. soldiers, Allied soldiers went and got these, said, look at that pile of bodies.
yes.
You look the other way. So it's, again, am I looking at it from a whitewashed, sheltered distance of, we shouldn't kill anyone? That is not progressive. Versus, you show me one of these cases, I'd probably be like, probably lose the color in my face. Not that there's much anyway, but give me the gun, or the Nuremberg trials, the guys that what was it, killing the SS by Bill O'Reilly or whoever his ghostwriter is. They talk about like the executioner who had went and set up like the nooses and stuff, and someone was like, how do you feel about this? And he's like, someone has to do it. And he's like, I don't mind it being me.
Well,
He's like, the people I execute, I know who they are.
yes, and somebody who would really be interesting in that vein would be Speer, Albert Speer,
Yeah,
Hitler's architect.
yeah, yeah. Man,
What did he know, and what was he complicit in?
yeah,
The good Nazi, they call him.
yeah. Well, remember, if you know how to build. We'll look the other way.
For a good old Werner von Braun.
Yeah.
Yes, we wouldn't been on the moon if we hadn't looked the other way.
Yeah. Hey, man, I also get the argument. It's who was it? Was it? I don't think it. I think it was maybe LeMay or someone else. Bissell, one of the just the toughest fuck guys in the post World War II America. One of them said, "Hey, there's no point in beating a dead Nazi horse. Like, we already beat him." But the argument was, if we have them, then we know that the Russians don't have them.
That's right.
You know, if it's in my hands, I know for a fact it's not in your hands.
Yes.
And it's, I guess, could you can make that argument. Be like, hey, this guy killed 6 million people. And it's like, yeah, well, if we give them to the Russians and the Russians advance their ICBM program and they shoot some megaton warheads at New York, they could kill 600 million people, 6 billion people. So that's one thing I've learned is Unit 731, that Japanese unit that made the Nazis look like Girl Scouts.
Yes.
Hey, we took them in and brought them into our chemical programs. It's one thing I've learned, man, is, hey, if you want to be a psychopath, make sure that there's military applications because you'll be picked up.
I have a really interesting perspective on that whole thing, the dropping of the bomb on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, because my grandfather was in the division waiting to invade Japan. And
so was mine. My dad's dad. I've never heard another person with that. My dad's dad was 18 years old, and he was getting ready to go over there. Right after Iwo Jima, Okinawa, Guadalcanal, was it Palilu? Right after all of this, and it was literally like we're just marching up, and each one's taking more and more lives, and we're cracking our knuckles and going, "We're really about to take the mainland." Hey, man, it could be argued all day that we should or should not have done it. I can argue that I wouldn't be here, and hey, I'm thoroughly enjoying my life. So, zero-sum game, man. It's them or us. It's again, listen, killing the Rising Sun by Bill O'Reilly. And I've recommended these books to people, and they're some people love Bill O'Reilly, some people are like, I'm not buying a Bill O'Reilly book.
Right.
It's not him. It's his ghostwriter. It's not him.
Right.
So give credit to whoever his ghostwriter is. His killing the SS and killing the Rising Sun. Those are some insanely good books. Another one.
Look at them because I'm looking at Killing Reagan and Killing Lincoln right now on my shelf.
Oh, really? Yeah. I haven't listened. I started listening to Killing Reagan. I didn't like it. Killing Patton is insanely good.
That's a great one. Yeah.
Killing JFK it's pretty good. Killing the SS, Killing the Rising Sun. Those are nuts. Operation Paperclip. I can send you these links. I listen to audio.
Yeah, sounds great.
Operation Paperclip by Annie Jacobson. Holy shit, man! You want to talk about like the guys we brought in, despite the stuff they did?
You bet,
dude. There's some serial killer vibes you get from some of these guys. But yeah, man, I'll send you those books, and I'll make sure. I don't want to spoil it. I'll make sure to watch that movie tonight, and we can get at it tomorrow. I don't want to keep you, man, because as you can tell, I never shut up. I can talk forever. But is there anything else you want to add?
No, not too much. I just thought it was something to be of interest, and
Absolutely.
It was a small moment in my life where I touched something of significance. So
yeah, and it's kind of like some people just need to be. I think it was former Secretary of Defense Mattis. He said some people just need to be shot.
Right.
It's like him or hate him. He has some awesome quotes. Some people just needs to be shot, and I think he said, and by golly, it's fun to shoot those people. I guess have you seen? Hey man, he cut his teeth in the killing fields, so I think he knows a thing or two about evil. But yeah, man, some people just need to be shot.
Well, John Wayne Gacy qualifies if anybody does.
Man, I think we would have woken up from the simulation if, for whatever reason, John Wayne killed John Wayne Gacy.
Wouldn't that be interesting?
I think that would have woken us up. Wait, hold on, what? All right, man. Well, thanks for doing today. I'll see you tomorrow because for everyone listening, we're doing one tomorrow. Tomorrow's will be exciting. Yeah, man. Can't wait to do it. And
enjoyed it.
You're an awesome guest, dude. I hope you plan on doing more than just tomorrow's. I'd love to have you come back on and tell more stories.
I'd love to.
Hell yeah, man. Hell yeah. I've got some recurring guests, none of whom are related. A recurring NASA guy, a recurring Delta Force guy, recurring lawyer. It's some people are just good to talk to. You're one of them. Paul Whitcombe, thank you, sir. I will upload this. And how long was I in the bathroom?
About 15 seconds, 20 seconds.
The problem is if I don't edit it, the file size is so much smaller and it uploads in like 10 minutes. If I go in and splice stuff, it like somehow quintuples the file size.
Yeah.
How long of a silence was it? I'm debating.
It wasn't bad.
Wasn't bad?
People can
fast forward through it?
I think so.
Okay, I'm just gonna leave it up. I'm not gonna edit it out. All
There
right.
you go.
All right. Thank you, sir. I'll text you as soon as it's uploaded. Do another one tomorrow. Tomorrow's is gonna be good. Let's
Good
do
to
it,
meet
man.
you, my friend.
Thank you, sir.
All
Take
right.
care.
You.
Bye-bye.